announcements area. All right. Okie doke. We're down to module 4, and take a look at a couple of things today. What I had on here was to visit with you some about Hewlett, and then during the text last week, we were looking at using doing sensitivity analysis and making use of the reports that we get out of Solver. Now, and then I had some other resources there for you to take a look at that will amplify a little bit of the material. I always like to make sure that you can see some practical examples of why this is such powerful stuff in terms of our ability to build models mathematically and look at what the world will look like if we take certain actions, or a high likelihood. The New York Times, and I'm just going to go over there for a sec, had a section, and maybe I think it's still over there on Sunday. I should probably just done the permalink to it. Let's see. But basically, they have an incredible set of interactive graphics that track the storm, and I don't want to take the time to scroll through here and find it. I'll find the link and send it to you. But basically, they were so good. Here it is. The National Weather Service and different people that were helping them out, different sets of scientists and agencies, when they were trying to predict the landfall for that hurricane, their prediction was based upon, their prediction was 2 miles off. That's pretty good. It's incredibly good. And what that did, then being able to pinpoint that, and as you go in, you can view the full map. It's interactive. And they have some briefings for you. But you can see, as they start to look at rainfall totals, and when they can, and you can see here on this 6 a.m. Friday, when they can pinpoint the landfall for one of these things, then they know how far evacuations have to go out. They understand what infrastructure is going to be put at risk, because that eye is going to be the focal point, and then everything around it in a certain radius, circumference, is going to be, you're going to get the bands of rain, the wind, etc. They did a tremendous job. Now here's as I scroll down, this showed a time lapse of this, but for them to predict this with just 2 miles of error is incredible. And they used a lot of the same kind of techniques that we use in business to try to look at optimal outcomes, i.e. like what we try to do with Solver, or to come up with alternative scenarios. So I wanted to show you this, and this is the one that was the most impressive. This was as they began to track the storm. Of course, they fly C-130s into, or 137s into the storm. They've got these people. I saw some on the CBS this morning. They had someone. They were videotaping them as they went into the hurricane, and they were getting readings of wind speed, all kinds of stuff. Then they take that data, probably sent it to Norman and different places, and came up with this prediction. But their ability to say, okay, here's where it's probably going to land, gives them, and the authorities involved and the people there who are going to be impacted, a good idea of what's coming and how big the swath of destruction will be, and then the rains and the flooding and all that. And it continues to be ongoing. And as they mentioned there at the top, they have some brief updates, but these can't be accomplished without some great mapping software, data analysis software, and people who collected the data and then have a model or a way to build it. And see, what they're going to do is, they, being National Weather Service and all the people who deal with hurricanes and the National Oceanic Atmosphere, that agency, NOAA, they're going to take that data and build a model. And so they'll be able to say, when we've got something out in the ocean, it's at a certain size, And we have a good idea of how much it'll progress, and then when it hits landfall with a certain type of topography, et cetera, we have a good idea what's going to happen. So I understand that sometimes you may want to believe that a lot of this stuff is just mumbo jumbo and it's not worth it's of no real value. What you learn in this course definitely is of real value, because our ability to model outcomes, and this is what they did here. They just simply created a map. It's a model to say this is what it's going to look like, enable them to marshal the resources, to contact the public, etc. So this is good stuff. It's powerful stuff, and it's helpful. More than the software, it's a way of thinking. That's the most important thing that I want to try to emphasize to you. Now, I want to look at the Hewlett, and I went ahead and put the key there for a moment, and I'm going to download it again. I'm going to throw it on my desktop, so it's not just a temporary file. I'll go ahead and show it in the folder, and we'll take a look at it, and we'll talk about it a little bit, because I said I was going to review it some. Okay, and this off. Open this up. Now, I would go ahead and open this, and you don't need to upload it now, but if you want to get out working with a temporary file status, you need to take it down to the desktop, resave it, etc. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and click the enable editing. The whole point of this was to see what kinds of outcomes we get if we change some of the variables. Okay, so we're going to go over to the original solution, and here I had pasted in for you, and you'll see that there on the right-hand top. Use the solver to compute cash flows and minimum funds if the price of all three bonds increases 2.5% or the price of all three bonds decrease. So what I said is, okay, we're working with a band here on the positive end, or the north side of this. We're looking at 2.5%. The south side of it, or the bottom, about another 2.5%. So a band there where we think the price of the bonds will fall. Well, what will it look like at either one of those extreme points or those outliers? And so we went ahead and put together we had the years, the cash requirements, all right? Then we had the price for each of them, and then we had the rate, and we had the years to maturity. So we've got a YTM here, and we're looking at an annual savings multiple, all right? Then we come down, and of course we're working now through these variables, these years that we're going to have a cash flow. And then here at the bottom, you'll see the constraints, the left hand and the right hand side, our cash requirements. How much are we going to need? And you'll see the relationship of the two of them. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go into Solver, and you should have it on there. So you click Data. Okay. And I'll open up Solver. And now here's the model. Now, as you've heard me say, this is also about a way of thinking. And for just a moment, stop and consider. First of all, I ask you in the problem, don't give me the right answer. Give me the answer based upon a couple of outliers. 2.5% increase, 2.5% decrease. If you're going to do any forecasting with assets of any kind, you always want to start at the outliers and work your way in, for the simple reason that the more volatile it might be, like a derivative or an option call or something of that nature, or land, okay, or real estate, which is highly volatile, you want to kind of have a handle. You want to have a handle as best you can on what it's going to look like if it's really, really bad, or what it will look like if it's really good. So you take those outliers and you start to work through them. Now, as we go on through the course, and you may have surmised this already, if you want, you could use the random function, okay, and generate a whole set of 1,000 outcomes using that random generator. Get some type of summary statistic that works best, plug it in and simulate that and see what it looks like. Just purely from using those random numbers. and you'll get a good approximation of what's out there kind of in the universe of outcomes or populations. Now, let's just walk through this real quickly, okay? I have an objective, a cell, okay? And that's over here in B20, right? And look at that for a moment. We'll go down here, and I want to know what are the minimum funds that I need. I'm an investment firm. I have to have a minimum. I have bonds here. I have a minimum amount so I can pay the bond holders their dividend. And it looks like to me it closes up at year 4. No, it's a YTM at 7. So you got to be ready to pay back the principal as well. Then you've got changing variable cells, and notice what we've got: A17, okay, and you'll see those over there. A17 all the way over to L17. And those are the variables that are going to be changing. Then we have the constraints. So we're saying, okay, I want to maximize this. I want to minimize my cash out. What do I have to do to minimize the cash out? All right. On the basis for each year, using these constraints in terms of the net cash flow and then the cash requirement. All right. Now, back in week 3 or module 3, I've got a link for you that talks about the efficient frontier. And if you're a finance major, if I have any of you in here, you should be at the point where you understand or know what the efficient frontier is. Okay. And that's really nothing more than an optimality boundary that says anything beyond this and your portfolio is suboptimal, okay? And that portfolio could be a set of businesses, it could be a set of traded assets, but there's a frontier, there's a boundary where you can go no further. And you'll want to, I've got a link out there for you to take a look at that. And so you can see we're using Solver here to work on a financial planning issue. And you're going to see us use it to look at arrival times, a whole host of different media buys, every single area in which you work in business, you can apply this because it's a thought process. What am I trying to do? Am I trying to minimize, maximize, or do I have a target value? Okay. The next thing, what variables are going to change? Then what are my constraints? And the final question is, how do I believe these data are distributed out in the world? Now, we're working from the simple LP, okay, and what we're saying is that the data are aligned primarily in a linear fashion. And we see a lot of those. And we're going to see some where we, as I've said before, we're going to see some cases where we work with nonlinear data. Typically, they're either concave or convex. And then we're going to work with some data we're not sure how they're distributed, and that's the evolutionary. Okay, now we can run this. I will just do the solver, and the narrative for this case is over there. Now, notice they found a solution, and then we have the 3 reports. Solver is a great tool, and you can use it in a whole variety of situations. Understanding what you're seeing when you get the report is as important. Okay, now let's take a look at that for a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. And I want to go over to the different outcomes or options that we have. Now, here's what we get if the bond price increases. All right. And here's a sensitivity report for that. Now, the sensitivity report, and you'll notice here, if you look at the top in the variable cells, you'll see allowable increase, allowable decrease. When we do a sensitivity analysis, we try to analyze a set of data. If we build a mathematical model like we have done here for a portfolio, a certain number of years to maturity, etc., then I'm going to ask myself, okay, what are the boundaries on that? Now, we've established some on those pricings of 2.5, positive 2.5, and negative 2.5. And I know that's just boring stuff. But it won't be boring if you're working for a financial firm and suddenly you've hit the outlier on the bottom end. The fun will begin for you. Okay, so if you're a finance major, let me say this. You need to have your ears and eyes highly, highly attuned to what we do in here, because this will show you a lot of what you'll encounter out in the real world. In fact, we use the models to simplify the real world and to try to use the best we can in terms of our estimations of how things will work. Well, this tool also assumes that you got somebody that knows what they're doing, okay? And for most employees, it's usually about a year or two before they really hit the ground running and they really know what they're doing. And that's just about anything you would do, all right? So we've got this sensitivity analysis, and we're trying to look at the largest and the smallest allowable decreases. And when we see these, this starts to tell us the bands per a final value, or pardon me, per a variable, how much flex we've got. You see what I'm talking about? Yes? No? It's kind of, think of it like kind of a derivative of the standard deviation. So much of what we do, which I hope you got this in statistics. If you didn't, let me fill you in. Statistics is about one thing. That is trying to model a set of data, trying to find measures of dispersion and measures of central tendency. And if they don't fit that kind of a bell curve, then we have what we call non-parametric statistics, and that's when you're starting to talk about things like a Poisson distribution, etc. But all of it is based upon probability. If I know that the data are distributed like a so-called bell curve, so-called normal data, I know that between one standard deviation above the mean, there's about 34% of all observations should fall. One standard deviation below the mean, about 34% should fall. So I know that about 2/3 of all observations should be somewhere between +1 and -1 standard deviations. So if I've got something that falls in there, I can say, okay, that's fairly normal. About 2/3 of the time, that's what I'll see. Then you can add on the other two, and it's just like a mirror. Then the next 2 standard deviations above is 14%, so I'm at 48 on the right-hand side. Then another 2% at the 3 standard deviations above the mean. And it just mirrors itself along the way. But this is all about probability. If you put a budget together, for example, and you say, here's our revenue, then here will be our expenses, etc. What you're really saying is, this is my best estimate, and this is, I believe this is what's probable. Now, that budget may not look as sound to you if you say, well, let's look at it in terms of probabilities that'll occur or not. Then you start to have some better insights, and then you could do some better planning, right? And sometimes it will help you with those perfect storm moments. You say, what are you talking about? Let me give you a really good example. There are a lot of people who say that the next big burst of our bubble is going to be the explosion of student debt. Now, a lot of people go, oh, student debt is just a small slice of the economy, etc. For now. However, if you leave school and you owe $50,000 or $100,000 or $250,000 or $300,000, a lot of people leave medical school on that much money. Some of them leave law school on $100,000. You're going to be strapped to paying that debt, servicing that debt. So that means you're going to have a fixed amount of money out of your income every year, every month. And you're going to be paying on that for how many ever years it takes you. If you're in a fixed financially where you're short on your cash every month, then suddenly you can't be the consumer that the economy wants you to be. You don't have any discretionary income. And without that, you can't buy a house. You rent. Okay? All the big money in Wall Street, the folks in these venture capital firms and these hedge funds, they're like, the only way they're like, I hate to say this, but it's true. They're a lot like jackals, okay? If you have a bunch of jackals out in the Sahara plains, jackals head for the best kill they can get. They want to get, and the big money right now in Wall Street is flowing into rental housing. People are buying up houses everywhere they can get and renting them out because we can't meet the demand for housing in terms of new construction And we're going to come to a point when the easy money's done that people won't be able to afford it anyway. Yeah, I was, wife and I like to go out and look around at the parade of homes. We were out yesterday, and I heard a couple, young couple, probably between them, they might make 90, maybe 100 grand. And they were looking at buying a $1.2 million home. Now, I would hope if they have like a 750 credit score or 800 credit score and they have no debt whatsoever or very, very little, they might be able to make the payment. But you can take the payment function and put 1.1 million. And if you're talking about a 3% loan, you can do the payment yourself. That's a chunk, much less the maintenance. So student debt is going to be one of those ripple things, I think, that's going to really tear us apart. And we've got to find a way to get a handle on it. This is a problem that we've created for you. You didn't create the problem. Okay, so we've got this sensitivity report. We're looking at the allowable increase, allowable decrease. Now let's scroll on down here, okay? And we're going to go over and we'll take a look here at what we've got that's allowable, etc. Okay, and we can do the shadow pricing. Now I'm going to close this off for just a second because it's not acting nice. All right, here we go. Now, this is a bond decrease, and then we have a sensitivity report for it. But the price decreases. And you've got the data in there to see how it's going to flow. And again, we're trying to figure out, okay, what are the outliers? What flex do we have here in terms of these cash outflows, these final values that we've got to come up with or want to come up with? You follow? It's that simple. Getting your brain to think like that is the tough part, because sometimes it's counterintuitive. As human beings, we respond to patterns, okay? And what I would do is this. I would probably use some type of conditional formatting, for example, to let the outliers really pop and let me see them and know what I might expect if that outlier indeed occurs. Then we have the original solution, and then you can compare them. This is a thought process, okay? As you go out to work and you're out there throughout your career, the first thing you should ask yourself when something happens is, what's the likelihood that this will happen, right? What's the probability that we can do this? And I won't go into my famous story a long ago where I call it the case of the car wash king. And it was a man who was in a town of 30,000. He wanted to get in the car wash business, so he found 3 locations. He got a cousin at the bank to get him a loan to build 3 state-of-the-art at the time car wash facilities. Now, this is a town of 30,000. He'd come to us, where I was at that point, and ask us, what does it look like? And as we did the numbers, what it meant was that every man, woman, and child in that municipality or in the county was going to have to wash their car at his place 4 times. But what did we know? We're just a stupid professor. That's what he called me. I said, okay, you'll find out. You're too capital intensive. Your business is highly capital intensive, which means you must have what? For me, Con, if I'm capital intensive, I've got to have a continuous flow, and I've got to be able to do what? Hit that point where I'm making my goods at the lowest possible point. For him, that meant volume. And I ran into him a few years after that, and he apologized because he lost everything. And I said, listen, I don't take any glee in this. I'm sad that you didn't listen to us and that you didn't trust our expertise, because he wasn't thinking probabilities and he wasn't thinking cash flows. He just wanted to be in business for himself. And he bought 3 car washes in a town of 30,000. I'm sure there will be people who wash their car at my place every day. I don't know. I'm not a marketer, so I'm not sure what he did with his marketing, but things went south and went badly. So this is what Hewlett is telling us in terms of what we can try to learn or understand in terms of using the sensitivity report. And again, it's for us to try to find some type of boundary, okay, that exists in terms of our problem. Now I'm going to go back to the modules now, okay? And we'll go down here to case 4. Let me stop for a second. Does anybody have a question? One of them is typically, are we past add drop? Another is, do you ever shut up? Only when I'm sound asleep or hungover. I'm never hungover. I don't touch the demon rum. Now, Jesus drank wine in the Bible, okay? But I'm one of those people who anything I did, I always got caught. There may be some of you out there. No matter what you did, your parents caught you. And I can only imagine if I go down and I buy my wine at Walmart, if they start selling it, and here's going to be my Sunday school class. I'm going to be going, So Paul said, if you think it'll cause your brother to stumble, don't do it. Which is why I quit going to First after church on Sunday with my brothers and sisters. They're eating too much. Anybody ever been to First? That's good food, isn't it? But you better fast about 4 days or take some Tums. All right, and it's good food, no doubt about that. Let's go down here to 4, okay? And we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 different cases. And let's go over to page. Let's start with the relax case, and that's over page 156. All right. And so I'm going to search through here. I'll get the contents out here. Let's see. And I'll just do a search for relax. Now you're going to find not being nice to me. All right. You're going to find the files in the student files for the Anderson text. So let's just go to files and I'll pull them out. Now, what you're going to see in these 4 cases is the use of Solver in a variety of situations. It's kind of like the Swiss Army knife of business problems. And here are the student Excel files. I may have them down here, so let me see if I do. Here they are. And I'll open this up. And I think we're in chapter, let's see, 4. And there's relax and wealthy. Let's open the relax file up. Okay. Now, as always with the workshops, I want you to try them and then upload them, and that's where you get the credit, because you should by this point have this pretty cold in terms of what you're doing. And I'll give you, I might even say, manipulate these variables or whatever. But let's look at what we've got now. This is a Lake Development Corporation, okay? And they're trying to do some advertising. And they're trying to figure out their best media buy. And so they have these different types of media that they're going to use. And they're trying to find out so they can get the best exposure for their money per media buy. So if you're a marketing major, this is a good case for you to think about, okay? And you could go into the text. They'll tell you what the DIV, ETV, and all that business is. But notice that we have some constraints. We built minimum customers reached, TV ads, our maximum TV budget, and then our budget overall. And this will give us the ads placed, and this gives us the exposure. Now let's open up Solver and take a look on this. So we'll go back to data, okay? And we'll open the Solver up. And here we're trying to maximize our exposure. That's B15. And we're going to change some variables. Everybody with me? You say it cannot be this simple. Yes, it is. Build a model before you do anything. And if you can build a mathematical model, that's the best way to go, because then you can prototype things into an operating. The reason you build a spreadsheet or you do a budget is to build a model. Unfortunately, most people build a budget, but they don't think about the fact that that budget the final figure is probably going to be subject to some random conditions that they're not ready for, or maybe some things they didn't take into consideration. It's a thought process. I can't emphasize that enough. You always have to say, what do the outliers look and what could they do to me? Well, let's look at this. We're going to maximize this. And we got the changing variables B13, and that's our media buy, our placements. And then we have some constraints that we've built in, and we'll come, and you can see these down here in the bottom on the left and right hand side. And notice that in two of these, we have to have, in the first one, notice the Boolean language that's in there. I've got to have an amount equal to or greater than, and I have another, less than or equal to, and then I have another greater than or equal to, and then I have another that's just back. So I have a greater than or equal to or lesser than, and then, so this is, when you see something like this, what you're saying is I've got some uncertainty, or I've got some disparate types of elements that I'm plugging into this model. So if I'm going to make the media buy and I have constraints that look like this, I should be prepared for some volatile kinds of results. Now, one of the unfortunate things about media buys is this: once they're bought, they're bought. And once you've paid for it, you've paid for it. And the advertising company or media company will not give you your money back. Now, you may have a performance issue with them where you say, I want a certain number of exposures. Now, let me ask you all a really kind of stupid question. Let's say that for every exposure, I get 5 sales. All right? How many sales should I expect to get if I've got 2,370 exposures? How would I figure that out? Multiply? I get 5 for every for every exposure. I generate 5. Okay, so if I've got 2,000 exposures, and if I get 1 for every exposure, then I would expect to have how many sales? Oh, yeah. So if I get 5 sales, I take 5 times that exposure. Okay. Now, if I flip that ratio, which is probably more, then I have to do 5 exposures for every customer I get. What does it look like then? The 2370 divided by 5. You follow me? Now, I've given you both sets of those because some exposures, this may be this could be something where the price point for this product is so attractive that you're going to get those 5 sales per exposure. On the other hand, you may be like everybody else and you get a ratio of them. How many of you have watched TV in the past, I don't know, 5 years and noticed that Anheuser-Busch runs the same commercial over and over and over and over and over? How about State Farm, Mayhem? Now I can deal with him, but the Allstate and the one with the chipmunks assaulting the car, I'm done with it. The Mayhem I like. As always you can see something. He's a good actor and he blows up stuff and all that kind of stuff. But after a while, people are tired of it. But they keep pushing it because they go on the assumption of, well, we bought it and we get it. You'd be surprised at how little advertisers have to pay cable companies. They can give them, I don't know, $20,000 and get the ad run maybe 1,000, 2,000 times. And it's you or me that has to sit through it. If you're saving on your DVD, you're rolling right through. If you're watching it live, you know, he goes, help me. Okay? And if you watch sporting events, we had a baseball game yesterday. I'm a baseball fan. It started at 7. We were through at 11 o'clock. I'm going 4 hours of my life. You know, I could have driven to Chicago and back in that amount of time, or I could have flown there. But, you know, they're doing things to speed up the game, like having challenges. That's smart. Let's take even more time. Oh, well. Now, notice here, again, we've got these constraints, but the constraints flow some different ways. All right. And so we're going to look at the, and we run the solver. So let's look at the sensitivity report. And you'll see here where we have our limits, the top and the bottom, the allowable increases and decreases. That's what the sensitivity analysis is designed to do. Okay? So this should help you put into perspective, well, is my model a good one? All right? Now, if the minimum cost to customer reach, if the minimum number of TV ads goes down because the maximum TV budget goes up, you may have to balance that off. Because right now what you're looking at is you've got a minimum of 10 ads and your maximum budget is 18 grand, but you're going to pay $1,800 an ad, right? So as you start to take this apart, and a marketing person, particularly an experienced marketing person, is going to see this and they're going to know the nuances in it, and they'll have those. If they've done the same media buy, if they're in the same market over and over, they'll start to understand that sensitivity. They'll start to understand intuitively what that band looks like. But the nice thing is, before I ever make the buy, I can plug this in and see what's going on and what it looks like. And then I can change it and play with it and maybe have a point where I can negotiate with my vendor, the people who's handling my media buy. Typically, I'll do a buy and I'll have an agency that will go then and deal with whomever, usually a boutique type shop. With the internet, that's all very, very different. That's completely different. Anybody have a question? I have any marketing students in here? Any? Finance? Accounting? Management? Good. Yeah. Don't tell them this stuff. Let them make a mistake and then put your friend in the job. Better yet, hell, no. No, yeah. I hope and pray and never in my old age I turn on the TV and I see one of you doing the perp walk with the cameras flashing. I graduate of OBU has agreed to cooperate with special counsel. The best schools in the world. What are they doing? Okay. Well, you can see we've got Relax. They're dirt daubers. They sell dirt. That's their job. And let's look at another. Now we have another case here, and that's Welty. Let's open that up. And you can go through the textbook and take a look at each of one of these situations. I've got the pages there for you. Okay. And here we've got a mutual fund. All right. And we're trying to build the best model for this mutual fund that we can get. Okay. Now, televangelists use this all the time. If I can rent a large stadium and talk real nice to people, they'll give me $1 billion, and I'll need a plan to serve the Lord. I'm being mean, aren't I? Probably not. I've got my late older brother was a minister. My younger brother, he's a minister. He's a bivocational minister. You'll love this. He works at the Supermax prison in Florence, Arizona, and he is a youth minister. Perfect combination, isn't it? Yeah, what happened to me? Well, I don't know. I always have told my family I really don't believe I was part of them. I think I'm a Rockefeller or something like that, but they disputed that. Okay, well, let's look at this. We've got this mutual fund problem. Now we have a projected rate of return, okay? Now, I would say the only thing that's missing from this projected rate of return would be, in my mind, what are the probabilities? Now, looking at this, and I'm looking at over here at column A and B, the array A4 through B9, what, in terms of those projected rate of return, what probability are we assuming for those? When we do probabilities, it should add up to 2 or 3, right? Probability should add up to what? 1. Misplaced comma here, misplaced decimal there. Your $1 billion shuttle might land in a planet whose name I will not say in this venue. Got to be careful. So we're assuming always 1%. So what are we assuming here? For Atlantic Oil, their return, Pacific Oil, Midwest Steel, Huber Steel. These people obviously don't know about Amazon and Google. What are the probabilities? Well, tell me first of all, how many of these investments do I have? 1, 2, 3. Our dog at 5. We have 5. Yes, there we go. Have you guys ever seen My Cousin Vinny, that movie? You remember he's cross-examining that one witness? How many trees are there? I see 1, 2. Ah, you missed 1. I love that movie. And did you know he's a graduate of OBU? That's not true. It's a lie. But he used solver techniques. And so did his fiancée. And she's talked about the torque and all that stuff. I tell you what, whoever the dialogue coach was is good. But let's say we got 5 investments. It's got to add up to 1. So we're assuming that each of these has a 0.20 probability. Correct? We can assume nothing more. We haven't assigned anything to it, but we do believe that probability adds up to 1.00. So that being said, we got 5. We don't. So we're just to say, okay, I'm assuming it's about 20% of the time I'm going to get each of these responses. Maybe not a good call, but there we go. So when you see that, always ask yourself, what's the probability that Atlantic Oil is going to give us a 7.3% return on our money? Pretty good until the pilot of one of their tankers gets drunk and rams offshore, and you have about $1 trillion lawsuit on your hands because you got a lot of oil out in the middle of the ocean. Yeah. Or you have a CEO who was a bad boy at the Christmas party, or a bad girl at their Christmas party. So when you attach those probabilities, you better have something to back them up with. But the author's keeping it simple. Just give us these rates of return. Now, we've got some constraints here. We've got available funds. The max we can put into, or we're going to put into, here's the total available funds, the oil max, the steel max, Pacific Oil max, and government bonds minimum. And that's what we're going to be putting into our investments. And then at the bottom, you can see the left-hand and right-hand constraints. The constraints, the left-hand and right-hand side of the equation, and the maximum total return. You say, is it really this simple? You would be surprised. It really, truly is. It truly, truly is. Companies that discipline themselves enough to do this are, they're very good. How many of you have ever seen the movie The Godfather? Okay, a well-disciplined mafia family, when you execute someone, here, always remember, take the cannoli and leave the gun. If you've seen the movie, you'll remember that. Take the cannoli and leave the gun. The gun's stolen, but the cannoli is, anybody here had a cannoli lately? You know what it is? Good, aren't they? Yes, very good. Good stuff. So leave the gun. It's unmarked, it's unregistered. No one will find out who it is until they come to take all of our guns. I don't know who they are, but I know they're out there. They've been against me all my life, and I will find out who they are. All right. So we've got a sensitivity report we can look at with this. And we can see here in terms of our variable cells, our constraints versus the variables, and what types of allowable increases we have. Now, I want you to notice something there in terms of the constraints, and that's the shadow price. The shadow price is also known as the dual value. And again, this is a measure of marginal utility. Okay? So what are you talking about? Well, if I build one more widget, how much more money do I make? Okay? If I at my graduation party, I drink one more Smirnoff Jello, have one more Smirnoff Jello cube, green and gold, how stupider will I get when I climb in the car and drive home? I'm not saying that I've ever done that or that I know that any of you have done it. So I admonish you here, don't. All right? I don't know. You guys have dancing here now, don't you? You can dance. Oh, I'm very concerned about that. There's a lot of sinning going on. They wouldn't let us dance. I'm not bitter. We didn't have dorms with suites and all that. Lunch, dinner at 6, you had to wear it. Oh, my brothers, I missed it, but we still had dinner at 6. You had to be there if you weren't there at dinner in the dorm. And then they built the Geiger Center, and the rest of it's, now you have this beautiful buffet. Mine was like, they slapped the food on there. Now you go into the thing and they got pizza and this. I'm not bitter. Not at all. Bunch of weasels. All right. Anyway, I'm crying and whining about that. But notice again, we have the final values, the shadow price, that is, what will we get in terms of our objective function, a gain or a loss, if that's what we want, per variable. That's all it is. Now, where I can really start to spiff this up, and you may want to explore with it, would be, for example, to run. Now, let me stop for a moment here. This, and we talked early in the text, they talked about controllable versus uncontrollable variables, okay? What I just highlighted there for you, those are what? Controllable, because that's what I'm going to invest, correct? What's uncontrollable is right over here, the rate of return. Back in 2005, I took 90% of my portfolio in TIA, which is a teacher's insurance annuity, whatever that is, and I put 95% of my assets in government bonds and guaranteed income. And my friends were laughing at me. You're only making 1.5%. You're an idiot. Then when the financial crisis occurred and their portfolios were losing 19%, I asked them, how does it look? And they said, 1% looks marvelous. I'll take it. By the way, I have no buy management people. So here, I try this. Now, this may be something you want to try when you go to the Pareto Homes. I'm the house of 1.1 million. And I asked the guy, the builder was there. I said, is there any way you guys would do a 150-year loan with a balloon at the end? And he said, can't do. And here I thought America was about us being great again and home ownership and all that. I waved the flag. I had my mother-in-law, she was with us. She cried, so I didn't get to buy the house. I think a 150-year note, pretty good, isn't it? With a balloon at the end. And I said, I'll even give you 28% interest. They passed up a deal. And if you're out there listening, you passed up on a deal. Okay, folks. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. And I'll broadcast Wednesday. And you see what you've got ahead of you, those cases. Just try and do some work with them. Maybe change a variable or two or whatever instructions I've given you there. And those 4 are due. So you'll download them and then upload them where they're due. Okay? I think we have a test coming up on that. I think maybe they're due Friday. Thank you much. And we'll look at the other 2 then. Yes? Question? Now, are you guys off to lunch or what? All right. Where are you going to eat? Your house. What are you having? Sandwich. Okay. What kind of sandwich? Oh, are you going to fry it first? Okay. Well, that sounds good, though. You have any chips with it?
Maybe a couple more.
There you go. Yes, ma'am. Oh, no questions. All right. They're fleeing. They're in flight. Yeah, I get out of here. See you later, my friends. Take care. All righty. Stop the share. Yes.